Welcome everyone to a new episode of Empower. Today is a very special day. I'm with Father Matt. Welcome to Empower. How are you doing?
Thanks, Luis. I'm doing great today.
Now, thank you for accepting the invitation, first of all, because I think we had been planning this episode for how long?
You mentioned it a while back, and I'm excited that it's happening.
Yeah, so first of all, I want you to tell us, who are you? For those people who don't know you.
Sure. My name is Father Matt Lowry. I'm the priest here at Northern Arizona University. I'm the chaplain on campus. I've been here for 14 years, and I've been ordained a priest 1 year more, so for 15 years total.
Okay. And how did you start your journey?
Well, it is a journey.
Let's go back on time.
Sure. For me, it went back to, it began in high school when a priest basically said to me, have you thought about priesthood? Mm-hmm. And my reply was, no, I want to be married. But it got me thinking about that. I don't know that I want to be a priest, but maybe God wants me to be a priest.
Okay.
And so I started praying and just reflecting on that question. And what I noticed was the more I walked towards God, the happier I was. Mm-hmm. So I reflected on my own experience that when I spent time in prayer or doing things for God, I felt more peace and I felt more joyful. And I learned a lot about God in that God's never outdone in generosity. And so I started walking down that path, and eventually it came to, there were several moments that happened, but I felt God inviting me to go all in for him. That I thought I had given him so much, and he's like, yeah. And Jesus gave us everything on the cross, and I feel like he was inviting me to give him everything in return, and it's been phenomenal.
So for a period of time, were you doubting if that was the right way, or were you 100% sure?
Oh, doubting's one way to put it. Discernment is hard.
Yeah.
So for example, when I was in seminary school, I was thinking a lot about, do I want to be married? Is God calling me to be married, or do I want to be a priest? And for a long, long time, I was like, well, I want to be married. I want to have a wife and children. I come from a family of 5 kids, and so I was like, always thinking that I'd be married. And what happened over time was my desire to be a priest just kept increasing, and eventually it became higher or more than my desire for marriage. And I was like, well, I actually think that maybe I might enjoy this as well, and I think God's calling me, so I'm going to go to seminary and give it a try. And seminary was very difficult because it's like discernment. I don't know. But there's a moment during the deacon ordination ceremony where you lay down on the floor, and the idea is that you're dying, basically. You're dying to your old way of life. You're dying with Christ, that we all do in baptism, but then we rise a new creation. And so I knew from that moment, I was like, well, I'm going to, stand up and be a deacon. I'm going to be holy orders. And so now I know that this is God's will. And so I think when we know for sure we are where God wants us, there's an incredible peace and freedom. And then I didn't have to worry about discerning anymore. But now I just could run and live and be a deacon, and then later be a priest.
Will you say that was the exact moment when you were 100% sure?
That was the 100% moment. Yeah.
Okay.
There was an earlier moment. One time I was in a prayer chapel, and one way to discern is to kind of try on things, like try on a pair of shoes, for example. And so I sat in the chapel and I would think about, okay, what if I was married? What would that be like? And so I imagine myself married. I imagine coming home and seeing my kids, and so then I imagine myself walking up the aisle of this little prayer chapel, and my wife or my bride was standing there waiting for me, and I walked up to the front, but instead of turning towards her, in my heart I fell on my face in adoration of God.
Wow.
And I didn't choose that. It kind of just happened in my heart. And I realized that as much as I want to give myself to another person, I want to give God everything. And through that gift of God of everything, that I would actually be able to give everything to whatever person was in front of me in any given moment.
A few moments ago, you were talking about that you were feeling peaceful, that you were feeling happier. How do you describe happiness?
Happiness, well, people define it as a state of contentedness, but I would talk about joy. Happiness. Well, happiness is different than pleasure either. Pleasure is when I'm doing something that's giving me endorphins or dopamine, and happiness is a little bit more of a different part of the brain where you get like serotonin, where it's kind of more calm. It's not like the excited, but it's like calm and happy. But joy is, St. Thomas Aquinas says, joy is when we have what we desire. And so if I'm hungry for a steak, I can enjoy a steak, but then I get full, or the steak is all gone, and I don't want steak anymore, and my sense of joy goes down.
Okay.
So if I find joy in things, it's always limited. St. Thomas Aquinas says if we find joy in a person, well, that's great, because we can enjoy friends, but then they have to go to work, or they move out of town, or one day they pass away. And all of a sudden my joy is gone. He said the only thing that can give us joy that doesn't end is God, because God isn't a thing. God isn't going to go away. God is always there, and His will is always happening. Even if I'm not happy about what's happening right now, that somehow when I know, wait, this is God's will and He's with me, that I can find joy and like delight in God, delight in life, even if it's really difficult. So joy is a fruit of the Spirit, which means that just like a tree only has healthy fruit if the tree is healthy, that when you and I are plugged into God, that one of the evidences or fruit or the benefits, blessings, is joy. And I think that's what God wants for all of us, but it really only comes by being plugged into Him, and then joy will be in our lives, and we can have it forever.
Yeah, that's true. Great definition. And also, like, it's not in my notes, but you mentioned something about like friends, and I wanted to touch this topic as well, and it's about friendship. Like, nowadays I would say friendships are like something that, yeah, you could be friends of this guy or this girl for a few months, and then that's it. You never see these people again. And in my life, I would say that has been something that has been happening recently, because, for example, okay, when I was in middle school, I was getting bullied, right? Of course, not physical bully, because like I was always big, but it was more like trying to like make
fun of you and stuff.
Yeah, stuff like that. But that kind of like hit me hard, because my only friends were like 2 or 3 teammates from the baseball team back home, like in 2012, 2013. Later in high school, like my focus was 100% on baseball, so I didn't even have time for friends, right? My friends were my teammates. And then I came to the community college in the US, and I found a lot of great friends that I'm still in touch with them. I would say with most of them. Now that I come to NAU 2 years ago, it's like, yeah, it was during COVID in spring 2021. All my friends were internationals. After 4 months, they all left.
They left, yeah.
And I was like, that's sad, because like I remember that time when it was in May 2021 that I'm working, and I'm like, damn, like I literally don't have any friends anymore, because all the friendships that I made, they are gone. And that has nothing to do with them or with me. It's just like, that just happened like life, that, right? Yeah. Exactly. And then like, I have been trying to find like closest friends. I probably have like 3 or 4 really good friends that I can count on them. The thing is, like, sometimes I remember that I used to think that friends are, or that followers are friends, or that people in church are friends, or people in my classroom are friends, or like, I used to think like, okay, so I see these people every day, we get along together, we have each other in Instagram, in WhatsApp, like sometimes we hang out. Of course, they are my friends, but that's not true. And I want to hear your opinion about that.
I think that's a very real human experience that most people have. Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, he talked about 3 types of friendship. The first is utilitarian, that you know, I'm nice to the guy that sells me my In-N-Out cheeseburger, you know, and it's friendly, but once the burger's passed, like, we're done. Or a lot of pleasure friendships, the second type is pleasure friendships, and for me, that was being on sports teams in the past. That I would hang out with people, we really enjoyed doing something together.
Yeah.
But as soon as the season was over, we didn't see each other again. The friendship didn't go any deeper. But Aristotle says a third type of friendship is what he calls virtuous friendship. It's when two people are focused on something outside of themselves that's bigger than them. And so, you know, like classmates in school, maybe they're interested in, you know, math or engineering or education. And so we're all focused on those same topics. And so there's kind of a deeper connection. But when God, or virtue, that's what Aristotle focused on, but when God, you know, when we're focused on Him, then there's always, as we're walking towards Him, we're actually going to keep growing closer together as we walk towards that greater goodness that God is. And what's cool about God-centered friendships is I can walk away and we not see each other for 2 years, and then we see each other again, and we're deeply connected.
Wow.
Because we're deeply connected about the right things, you know? The other thing about friendships, you know, if you're not actively working on friendships, they're kind of fading away because people move away, stuff happens.
Yeah.
And so we always have to be working on that. I think it's cool that you had those good friendships, and then we keep working on others, and some will last the test of time and others don't. But I think in our world today, we have a few close friends, and we stop reaching out to keep working on friendships. But I think that's something we have to be working on all the time.
Yeah, exactly. You said something super cool, like about trying to focus on something bigger than us, which is God in this case. And that made me think like how my parents' friendships are. Like all of his friendships, and okay, my dad's and my mom's friendships, all of these friendships are based on God. They all met in church. When they get together, like because some of them live in different cities, they get together, they're always talking about God, about church and stuff, and I was like, that's why these friendships have lasted so long, right?
I mean, I have friends that I've known since high school, and we get together and the conversation is often very shallow. You know, you can only talk about the Phoenix Suns and the Arizona Diamondbacks are doing pretty good right now. You know, like you can only talk about that so long, but what really matters, what endures. And so, friendships on those deeper things are just stronger.
And I was asking you this question because, like, when I had the accident, I think that I didn't tell you when first time that I talk about this in the podcast. But like, when you saw me the other day, I didn't tell you that much, but it was like I just didn't want to talk too much about it. But yeah, I was in my scooter in front of the bookstore, and when I fell, my face hit the ground, the street, and that moment I immediately passed out. And when I woke up, it had been probably like an hour, and I woke up in the hospital, and I was like, hey, what happened? And then they were like, you had an accident. And I was like, really? And then they were like, yeah, you know what happened? And I was like, no, I don't know what happened. Why am I here? And then kind of like in the movies, you know? And then they were like, yeah, you had an accident. We don't know what happened. You don't know what happened, but like we're making sure that you're going to be okay. And I was like, okay. And then later I called a friend. I called my girlfriend. Then I called 3 of my teammates. And then one of my teammates was here. He was the only one because it was the first day of the summer. So everyone was gone. So he stopped by the hospital. He spent the night with me.
Wow.
He and his girlfriend were bringing me food because I was literally sleeping all day, but they were making sure like I was going to be okay. And then I was like, wow, like he's a teammate that I barely know. I mean, at this point, I know him pretty well, but probably, let's say, last semester, we were not close friends. But during this semester, we went to a Christian concert, the Newsboys.
Yeah, I like them.
And then we were in San Diego, Phoenix quite a few times, Tucson, just like for the baseball stuff. And I think we got closer. And that was pretty cool, like to count on him like that time. And then my parents picked me up 2 days after. They drove me to Hermosillo, and then I had surgery there. I was in the hospital for 8 days. And I'm from Hermosillo, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, oh yeah, I have a lot of friends here. But only a few show up to the hospital. And I can tell that some of the few people who went to the hospital were just there for that gossip. They just wanted to know what had happened. They wanted to see my face in person because they had seen the pictures and everything. And you can kind of feel like when someone's there like genuinely, and when someone's there like just because they want to see what happened, or just because then you can tell them that you didn't show up. You know what I mean? So when that happened, I was like, all right, like, I mean, that was cool to see people that I hadn't seen in a long time, and that wasn't planned, of course, like to be there. And then I had surgery, and then I went back to my house to recover for another weekish, and then I will be telling my friends, like, hey, you want to stop by my house? Like, I'll be here, like, you know where I live, like, just come spend some time with me because, like, I'm super bored. And none of them show up.
Wow.
Literally none of them show up. And I was like, that's crazy, because even some people told me, oh, I'm on my way to the hospital, I'll be there. And then they were not there. And then they were like, oh, let me know when you're in your house, like, can we visit you, whatever? And I was like, oh yeah, sure, like, I'll be here. Like, if not, like, just call my mom or my dad and they'll open the door for me. And none of them show up. And I was like, that's crazy. Even I remember that my mom told me, like, oh, that's cool, like, none of your friends show up because I know you probably told them you didn't want them here because you wanted to rest. And I was like, that was not a thing. Like, they actually didn't show up, even though I wanted them to be there. And only one friend showed up because, like, she's the first person that I call, and she's from my community college. She's one of my best friends. And then she and her boyfriend were in Hermosillo as a coincidence. So she and her boyfriend came to my house, like, to spend some time with me. That was super cool. But that wasn't planned, you know? Like, all the other people who were in town, they didn't show up. Only one uncle and my grandparents, of course, right? But I was like, that's crazy. Now, after the accident, I am seeing life in a different way, because I used to be focused only in money, only in professional success, you know, trying to think a lot about the future. And after that, it's like, wow, like, literally the only people that I can count them with the fingers on my hand, right?
Wow.
So that was like something that, it didn't hit me hard, but it made me realize a lot of big stuff.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's tough. It's in our difficult moments that we see who our real friends are. And yeah. And I think friendship we have to be intentional about it, you know? And difficult moments can really prove friendships when they show that I'm here for you, not because you do things for me, but because of, like, who I am more than anything. And isn't it funny how our human hearts, we know when people are really good friends or not. We're not always honest with ourselves, but if our friendships are focused on deep things, then that's great. But if it's shallow, like, you're not serving a need from me, then I'm done with you. Like, our hearts were made for friends that won't leave.
Yeah.
And I believe Jesus is that friend that is with me no matter what, and he loves me even if I keep the door closed to him. But that makes me actually want to open the door and spend more time with him. And so that, speaking of going back to discernment, like, that friendship with Jesus, like, I know he loves me so much, and he died for me. Like, that's the kind of friend I want to live with and for, and so I'll follow him wherever he goes. Yeah.
And right now, like, you work, like, for the past years with a lot of college students. Probably, like, more than 90% of people who come here are students, right? At least on Thursday when I come sometimes. And how is it for you to work with college students? Because that should be super different in your case compared to other fathers that are just, like, in a normal church. You know, this is more like a campus church, I would say.
Yeah. I love working with college students. At first, I was nervous because I thought college students want nothing to do with God. They're focused on other things. But what I have come to learn and recognize is all of our hearts are made for God. We have a hole in our heart that only God can fill. And people love to be respected. And so I walk up to someone, hey man, how's it going? I'm Father Matt. What's your name? And people are very responsive. And people are searching. We had a young man who was walking by the first week of the school year, and he just saw that we were having an event and some food, and so he just kind of wandered in. Hey, what's going on? And so we fed him. He met some people. They invited him back, and sometime later, one of the seniors here, hey, let me get your number, man. And so he got his phone number and just texted him, grabbed lunch. He ended up saying, hey, I lead a Bible study. If you want, you can come join us. He's like, okay. He's like, I'm not Christian, but I'd love to come hear what you guys are talking about. So he started coming to this Bible study, and his heart started coming alive. And he's like, I'm really loving this. I don't know why, but I love what we're talking about. And it led to now where next year when he comes back, he's like, I want to learn more about the Catholic faith, and I'll probably be baptized. And we're like, that's great, man. No pressure, but come seek, and we believe you'll find.
Wow. No, yeah, that's crazy. And I mean, that's one of the positive things, of course. But what would you say that are like the biggest challenge that you have dealing with college students?
Well, I think college is a whole culture. I mean, we have a culture around us everywhere, beliefs, ideas, and so we find ourselves seeped in different cultures, and we don't recognize it. And so I love, typically in college, you want to start questioning things like, okay, what is friendship, or what is true? Does God exist? What's the purpose of life? And so I love being able to kind of pull out some of those questions. But if students think they already have the answers, and there's a lot of people who find security in these answers, and they're not open to discussing them. And so that's kind of a challenge where people have already made up their minds. They've and we kind of know too, when people put us in a box and they're not listening to us, they're not respecting us, that maybe they're talking to us, but it's more talking at us, and so that's actually, that influences how I talk to people and how I talk to college students and how I preach at Mass. Is I talk to people how I want to be spoken to, just hopefully respectfully and with kindness, and so I think that's one of the challenges, is they don't realize that their maybe ears are a little closed. I think people are very busy. There's pressure, they're trying to figure it out, and there's still a heavy pressure to fit in and be liked. And so when I talk to especially underclassmen, they're trying to make friends, and so they're kind of selling themselves out a little bit. They're compromising their own values in the hopes of making friends. But a true friend is never going to ask us to change who we are. A true friend is not going to ask us to change our principles to be able to fit in somewhere. Instead, a true friend is going to want to try to understand us and respect us for where we're at.
Yeah, would you say questioning the existence of God is common?
Yeah, I think all of us ask that question, how do I know that what I know is true? How do I know that there's more? And I think in our human heart, we know that there's more. Like, you look at the Grand Canyon, and it just blows you away of like, this is so beautiful and big, like something even more big and even more beautiful must have created this. Or there's so much order in the universe, it's too much for coincidence. So there's, our logic and reason can kind of point to a higher power. But we believe as Christians that we wouldn't know what we know about God unless He revealed it. Like, God chose to reveal His inner heart, His inner life, and so that's how we know more about God's existence. But I think everyone asks that, because there's a quote, St. Augustine says, our hearts are restless, O God, until we rest in you. That you have made us for yourself, O God, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you.
Okay.
So every one of us is restless, searching for that peace that we can only find in God.
Yeah, and I'm asking you this question because it has happened to me many times, other people that I know. And also, I remember when I was in the community college, my psychology professor, he's not a priest, but he's like he shares the word of God,
Wow.
That's how my dad and he met. They are super close friends, or probably not anymore because they are in different cities. But he became something very special to me, because whenever I had questions, I could always go to him. His son plays baseball too, so it was another good connection there. And I remember one time in class we were talking about this, and I remember we as students, we used to ask him hey, and what's your opinion? And then he's like, I cannot give you my opinion because I'm a figure of authority right here. So if I say something, it's going to have an influence on you. So I want you to make sure that you think critical, that you're not going to be influenced by me. That's what he used to say. And I remember something really cool that he said was, I'm probably Catholic because my parents are Catholic and because I was born in Mexico. If I would have been born in Morocco, in another Arabic country, I probably would be Muslim, So what would you say the culture has an influence on the religion that we practice?
Yeah,
because I have friends for many different religions, because they are from Morocco, for example, this friend, and he's that kind of makes sense because like what my professor said, like if I would be born in Morocco, I would probably be Arabic, like I mean Muslim,
Yeah. Mother Teresa, or Saint Teresa of Calcutta, she said one time, she was asked this question, and she's like, the best thing is for a Muslim to be a good Muslim, for the Mormon to be a good Mormon or whatnot. And I would say this, though, I think all of us, we're all trying to get to the same destination. And so you think about like a tall mountain, that the destination is the same, and perhaps we have different ways to get there. But I will say this, that the ways are not the same. That some people, I'm going to figure this out, and they've got a machete, and they're like cutting through the woods, and other people are climbing up boulders. The Catholic way, I believe, is that Jesus comes and shows us, hey, there's a path to get there. Like, here's this road, and actually there's a bus that'll help take you there, and there's rest stops along the way, and there's people who are going to help show you the way and encourage you. And so while the different religions have elements of truth and things that can make you holy within them, that we believe that Jesus gave to his Catholic Church the fullness of the means we need for salvation. That he's given us the fullness of truth that we need to be able to get to heaven, and all the means and help to be able to get there.
Okay, and will you say that there's some stuff that you don't agree with in the Catholic religion, or you agree with 100% everything?
What I have found is, as I've grown in my faith, that my beliefs, that the church hasn't moved, I've moved closer to the church.
Okay.
If you think about it, like, okay, so we say the church, but it's the body of Christ, it's Christian members and faithful followers who in the beginning knew Jesus. The apostles walked with Jesus. They knew Mary, his mother, and they listened to what he said and they implemented it. And this was passed down, and they've been thinking about the same questions that I think about for 2,000 years. And people much smarter and holier than me, and they've come to these answers. And Jesus promised that he would be with us always, and the gates of the netherworld shall never prevail against the church. That he would preserve us in truth. And so I ask myself sometimes, what's more likely? That me, with my limited mind and education and experience, is smarter and knows better than the Holy Catholic Church, made of 1.2 billion people over 20 centuries, with holy people, smart people, and discerning and praying and thinking about these questions and thoughts. Like, what's more likely? That they are all wrong, or maybe I'm a little wrong?
Hey, that's true. Okay, I'm gonna cut it really quick. Okay, so we're back. And what would you say, like, what things were the things that you didn't agree with that now you agree with?
Well, I want you to say, not that I didn't agree with, but I didn't fully understand. I could think of two, and they're kind of controversial, but I remember the topic of abortion.
Oh, yeah.
And my thought, like a lot of people, was, well, I wouldn't have an abortion, and not just because I'm a man. I wouldn't have an abortion, but who am I to tell somebody else what to do? And then one day, just talking to someone and thinking about it, they're like, well, why wouldn't you have an abortion? I was like, well, because there's a second human life, and I was that big at one time, and I just needed some time and nutrients to be able to become to who I am, and I'm continuing to grow and develop. That this human life just needs time and space, and I think we want to protect innocent, vulnerable human life. And they're like, okay, so we'll finish the sentence. It's okay to kill a baby in the womb when... And I thought about it, and I was like, never. And I realized that in that moment, I was like, wow, that this is a human life independent of any value that other people put on his or her life. And that human life is worth preserving and protecting. And what we actually need to do is spend more effort supporting the mom. And no one wants to have an abortion. And so how can we help support her so that she can, give this child life and have her needs met? And if she doesn't want to raise this child, there are thousands and thousands of people that want to adopt a newborn baby. and they're waiting. They can't have kids themselves, so let's help connect them. And anyways, I think there's better solutions. I think there's a better turning to violence is rarely, if ever, the solution we want.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was an area where I was like, wow, I get it.
Yeah.
And then once you see it, once the light bulb's turned on, like, this is a human life, and I can't think of a situation where we should terminate this human life, because I sure wouldn't want that to happen to me when I was that size, you know.
Uh-huh.
Anyways, the second issue has to do more with, I think there's a lot of questions that people have around sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, talking to, say, a guy who's attracted to other men, and he's like, why did God make me this way?
Mm-hmm.
And the short answer is like, I don't know. Like,
Uh-huh.
I don't know. All I know is this is where we find ourselves, and now we can choose how we want to go forward. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, well, does that mean we should change what God's revealed as his plan for our sexuality?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I don't think we want to change the world to bend to my desires. But sometimes I might need to curb my desires
Mm-hmm.
to find true happiness. Like if a married man, you know, leaves his wife at home and starts being attracted to his secretary, you know, he needs to learn to say, am I going to act on these desires? Am I going to act on these attractions? Or am I going to choose how I'm going to go forward? And so I think we
Yeah.
all have choices on how we live our sexuality. And I think coming to realize that I don't have all the answers, that human person is a great mystery, but somehow God is good and faithful, and the sexuality he's given us an ordering and a plan to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've come to greater harmony with that over time, that, like, again, what's more likely, that God's plan and who God is needs to change
Yeah.
because I feel a little differently, or maybe, as Jesus says, conform your mind, conform your will, conform your whole life to Christ, that maybe this is my invitation to conform myself to God.
Yeah, and I remember, like, now that you're bringing these things, like, about, like, people who are attracted to their same sexuality, that same professor that I was telling you, his name is Carlos. Saludos, Carlos. Yeah, he was in my podcast too a while ago, and we were talking a lot about, like, God stuff. And yeah, so something that he said is, like, there were, like, this group, and I'm probably, like, wrong. Don't quote me on this because I'm trying to remember as much as I can. But he said, like, there were, like, this group of, like, the smartest psychologists, doctors, like, all these people who used to think, like, this kind of stuff was, like, a mental disorder. But now, if you say that it's a mental disorder, like, people are gonna be...
They get very angry.
Yeah, exactly. But what Carlos was explaining in that class, because I was like, we all were in that class. That was not a one-on-one conversation. And he said, like, these 5 people changed that. So it was only 5 people who decided not to make it a mental disorder anymore. So it's like, it's an opinion, you know? It's not like a fact or anything, but it's always like a super controversial topic.
Well, I've been learning a lot more about psychology and development, and there's a bunch of fascinating books out there. And it's amazing how we are made into who we are. And this book I was reading recently, the Myth of Normal by Dr. Gabor Mate, he talks about how our desires are almost kind of given to us. That even though I think that's my desire that's coming from within, he's like, no, it's molded, and I don't want to misquote him, but it just, the idea is that our environments have so much of an impact on us. And then we can choose how we go forward from there, but we can also create healthy environments that, anyways, just because we experience something doesn't make it normal.
You know, for example, like in baseball, if my dad and my grandpa wouldn't have played baseball, probably I wouldn't be playing baseball, right?
Yeah.
I didn't choose baseball. My parents, they put me in this baseball league when I was 3 years old, and I just got in love with baseball, right? So that was probably in my ADN or DNA in English.
Yeah, so we don't have to blame anybody or fight anybody, but simply say the mystery of who I am who I am, but now I get to choose how I go forward in my life. What do I choose to love? How do I choose to live? You know, seeking truth, all that. Seeking greater healing and integration. All of us need. I go to counseling. You know, I think all of us, just to find great inner peace and wholeness.
Yeah. Wait. Moving to a different topic, because this is a podcast where I always like ask questions related to business, networking, and all that stuff. So I want to talk now about like the finances of the church. How does church make money?
Well, first of all, the church isn't in the business of making money, but how they receive revenues to be able to do what they can come from donations of the people. Although there's certain countries, interestingly, like in Germany, you have to you can register as a faith, and then the government takes certain tax money and gives it to the church. And the people will say, well, so if I don't register as Christian, then I actually get to keep more money and pay less tax. So they'll pay less tax. And anyways, so here we believe that it should be freely given. You know, St. Paul talks about that, freely given gift. And so when we pass the basket around at church, then people will put whatever they want to.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Some faiths are really intent on 10%, and it does mention tithe there a couple times in Scripture, and so they'll say you need to put in 10%, and I actually think that's a good number for us, like a minimum, to give God the first fruits. And so, but the Catholic Church, we don't enforce that. We suggest, maybe you give 5% to your local church, give 1% to the larger church, and then 4% to other charities and things that are important to you.
Yeah.
That's kind of a suggestion I've heard. And then what happens then is for the money that's put in the basket here, a small percentage goes to help the broader church. So we have like a bishop, and he's got his own staff. And the staff actually support all the churches. So it's kind of an infrastructure. And so a percentage of what we receive here, actually here at the Newman Center, it's 5%, goes to help support that. And I think of those monies, a small percentage of that goes to support the even higher structure of the Pope and his people and those kind of things.
Oh, actually? That's interesting.
I think a little bit, goes to that. That's my opinion. I could be totally wrong.
Okay.
But there's other collections that are out there that, like St. Peter's pence, they call it. But the idea is to put on our 2 pence, our 2 coins, to help the broader church that, especially in America, like in North America, we are so blessed and so rich by the world standards that we have the ability to make a big difference in helping the church in Eastern Europe and Africa and Asia and all over the place. And so it's always donations that are given.
The church doesn't pay taxes, right?
Correct.
Yeah, because I was like, in Mexico it's like that. I wanted to make sure if it was the same thing in the US. And I was in this class with this professor in NAU, and we were talking about, it was a non-profit organization class, something like that. And $500 billion of donations happen every year in the U.S.
Of donations, $500 billion?
$500 billion.
Yeah.
It was 485 and a lot of zeros, but it was $500 billion.
Yeah. And here's the thing, not everybody's generous. And actually not everybody with money is generous. But that's why Jesus highlights this young widow, this poor widow who puts in 2 coins, her whole livelihood. And there's something beautiful about that because God is never outdone in generosity.
Yeah, that's true.
And so when I give money to a church, what am I doing? I'm supporting the mission of proclaiming the good news of salvation. Like there's nothing more important. When I give money to the local Catholic charities in St. Vincent de Paul, I'm trying to help the poor people in my community, and I think that's good for people to do, and a lot of people do that.
And thinking more about your expectations, like, because I know that you have dreams for sure, like as we all do. When you were just starting in the seminar, like to become a father or priest, that's how you say, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever wanted to be the Pope? Because I was like, for example, like if you start in an organization, like in this business, like probably you want to become the CEO, right? Like in your case, how does it look like?
Well, so at the Last Supper, here's Jesus, who's God. He wants to show the disciples what leadership looks like. And he gets on his knees and he washes the feet of his disciples. That in the church, to lead is to serve. Now, that's how it's supposed to be. That's how I've seen it mostly. But you can have people who are aspiring to certain... But here's the thing. I love being here at the Newman Center, where I get to go have lunch on campus and walk with students and walk with people. It's so meaningful. If I go and become the next level, so to speak, if God chooses me to be a bishop or whatnot, then I'm actually going to be further removed from the people I love and care about. Now, my responsibility is actually going to be not more burdensome, but over a broader people, over a broader area of land. And there's kind of a responsibility to that. Now Christ carries the responsibility. He says, my yoke is easy, my burden light. So Christ is the one carrying it. But there's kind of a burden to that it's like, no, I want to be here with the people that I love. And so it's not about that. And then like, people think like, oh, the Pope has a little power and he can choose and tell people what to do. And it's like, no, he's in service to the people. He's in service to the truth. He can't, the Pope doesn't tell us what to do, he's in service to the truth. He doesn't get to dictate what is truth.
And have you ever wanted to be a pope? I didn't forget a question.
I do not desire to be Pope.
Oh, really?
No.
Okay. I'm asking you because, like, behind you, there's like the picture of Juan Pablo II. I don't know how to say his name in English.
Yeah, St. John Paul II, yeah.
That's why I didn't know. But he was one of, like, my role models when I was a child. I watched his movie. It's a 6-hour movie. You probably already watched it, but I love that movie and everything that happened in that movie. And, all right. Other thing is about misperceptions. That was, like, a topic that I'm really interested in. Because, for example, like, in my family, like, I grew up in a really Catholic family. My mom teaches, like... Catecismo, how you say that in English?
Catechism.
Okay, that's why I didn't know.
Yeah,
in the school, right, in Hermosillo. So she's always on it. My dad is on it as well. Like today, I was trying to talk to my dad, and he was like, "Hey, your mom and I are in un retiro right now, like in church and stuff." And right now, like I'm older, that I can think by myself. I have been questioning myself a lot of stuff. I have been questioning God and just like. Something that is kind of like deep, you know? And I remember like one of the things was related to money because I remember like, oh yeah, I want to be a millionaire someday. I mean, I'm a business major, so it's kind of like I hear about money the entire time. And of course, like I want to have a good life. I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to have a good family, you know? Like I don't want to be living in poverty, of course. And other thing, it's for example, I know if I was doing something great, I used to think like, okay, that was because of God. And then I was like, then I shouldn't have put that much effort if God was gonna make it happen anyway. But like, I remember when I was just trying to come to the US in 2017, I was super into God, and I made it right one semester. And I remember that semester was extremely hard. I was feeling lonely the entire time, and I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it to next semester. I got a scholarship, so I made it, and then I published my book. I sold it, then I paid for my third semester. It was like a long story because like money was always a problem, and then my emotions were a problem too because like I was feeling lonely. I was feeling like I didn't belong. Just like all this stuff like everyone passed through when they are new to a different country, of course. And I remember like, all right, like I'm in church. I was in church all the time, like in Douglas, Arizona, and I was the youngest by far. I was 18, and everyone there was above 40 for sure. So I couldn't relate because they were talking about their children, their wives, their husbands, and what can I talk about with them? You know, it's like I didn't feel that I was being part of the conversation, you know. And then when I would go back home, I would go to the church. It was kind of like the Newman Center because like everyone was the same age as me, 3 years younger, 3 years older, but kind of like in the range. But I would go there like whenever I would go to visit, you know. And other thing was about if I was okay. So after that, my relationship with God kind of like was getting broken, and I was like, okay, now I got this scholarship. I'm able to go to NAU. Now I'm finally being able to work and make some money to pay my bills and all that stuff. So I was questioning myself like, why? When I was super close to God, I was struggling that much with everything, and now that I haven't been that close to God, everything is happening in a really good way. So that's like a big confusion that I have.
That's a great question. I mean, and I'm glad part of it addresses too that this misperception that if I turn to follow God, everything's going to work out perfectly. Like there's something out there Catholics don't believe in called the prosperity gospel.
Oh yeah.
You give your life to God and he will prosper the work of your hands, that everything will go be very fruitful and rich. Now, there's Psalms and things that talk about that in Scripture.
And my sister passed away too, right? I don't know if I told you this, probably I didn't. But my sister, like, she got cancer when she was 9 and I was 13. And yeah, like, it's been super hard to overcome that, right? Like, my family and I were always serving God. My sister was super close to God. And then we're like, why did he choose my sister to pass away when she was only 9 years old? Why did she have to go to 6 surgeries? Like, the doctors had to cut one of her legs. It was like a big thing in my family for almost 2 years. And then she passed away, and of course it was even harder. But then I was like, why did he choose her? And then a lot of people were saying, oh, because God needed an angel. And he's like, I don't think God needed an angel. I mean,
thank you,
God.
but no thank you.
Exactly. A lot of like this kind of stuff. And then I'm like, it's harder to believe. Because I remember even my parents would tell me like, hey, Luis, probably God, think about it. God chose your sister to die, but just imagine like how many people turned their lives to God because of your sister, because that actually happened. But I'm like, I don't care. Like, I would rather have like all these people go to hell, but have my sister alive. Yeah. Because that's my perspective as her brother, of course. Like, if you ask like from a totalitarian perspective, of course that works, right? But in this case, I was like, I want my sister with me, you know? So that was even harder.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I can't imagine being 13 years old and watching your little sister die. I mean, that's traumatic, and that would cause me to question everything. And the short response is, why does God allow suffering? We don't know. But what do we know is that when Jesus saw us suffering, he chose to come be with us in our suffering. That he chose to put it on his shoulders and carry that cross to the hill and be crucified and die so that we would never have to be in that place alone. And so we don't know why certain people suffer and others. I mean, the truth is everybody suffers. And from our perspective, it feels like everybody's suffering less than me. But we can see objectively certain people suffer more.
Oh, yeah.
And we don't know. I don't know God's mind and plan. I don't pretend to. But what I do know is that we don't have to suffer alone, that he chooses out of love to be with us. But also, you know, we know that, okay, suffering, it might lead to death. And it's like, well, the reality is that we're all going to die.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of time. I was just hoping for more time, but I actually need to die so that there's an end to suffering, and then I can enter into the eternal life that God has planned for me. That in God's original plan, there wasn't suffering and death, but original sin brought that into the picture. So then God responded so that we wouldn't be cut off from eternal life, but the door was open through Christ that we could have that.
Yeah, and like this makes me think about like a conversation that I just had with my dad like a month ago or 3 weeks ago when I was still back home. Because, so I had the accident, right? So my parents already lost my sister, and now it's me left, which is very far. I'm very far from them. And when I had the accident, like, so as soon as I hit the street with my face, I pass out immediately. I have the video of that. And I can hear in the video, like, me trying to breathe, a lot of people asking for help, calling 911, the ambulance, like, all that stuff. I wake up in the hospital, and I would be telling my friend, bro, don't let me die, don't let me die, don't let me die. I was super scared. I had never been that scared in my life. And then I realized that, okay, I'm good. Now I know that I'm going to be good, because, like, when I woke up, I was like, where am I? What year is, like, because I didn't know that it was 2023. I didn't know even what day it was. It was like, I lost a lot of memory. Now I don't even have memories about that day. I mean, I don't have them, right? It's like pretty cool not to have them. But like, some friends told me like, hey, Luis, you called me, you told me this. I was like, I don't even remember calling you. I was just acting like I don't know.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking too much. And when my parents came here to pick me up, like, I didn't know, but my parents, they thought that I was gonna die.
Wow.
Because they saw me in the hospital, because people would be calling them, and no one knew what happened. They didn't know that it was a scooter crash. And then I go back home, I'm in the hospital. After 2 days, I was feeling better. And I remember that I told my dad, hey, Dad, do you know what's crazy? That you saw my face, right? And I never had pain. And then they were like, Luis, what are you talking about? Like, you were complaining about pain. And then I told this same thing to my roomie, and they were like, yeah, you were complaining that you had a lot of pain. And like, I saw some conversation with friends, and they were like, hey, how are you doing, Luis? And I'm like, it's a lot of pain. But then I told my dad, hey, I didn't have any pain. But it was because I didn't
Wow.
remember.
Yeah.
I had a lot of pain, but I can barely remember that, right? And my dad told me later, after my surgery and everything, that the doctors told him, and then some doctors told me that I could have died immediately, or I could have lost mobility on one side of my body. And the thing is, like, it was the first day of the summer, no one was there, and some people found me as a coincidence. Probably they were guardian angels. That's what a lot of people told me, and I believe that, because if I would be there like the entire night, like I would have died immediately, you know,
Yeah.
and it would be like bad death. And then I was about to lose my eye because like the 4 bones or something like that hold my eye, they broke. So I have screws, metal plates on me right now. That's why my eyes are not aligned. So right now I can see good, but during nights and when I lay down in bed, I see all distortion. I can focus, but it's gonna heal over time. Right now it's like 100% good, you know. But my dad told me, like, when he drove me from the hospital to my house, to our house, after the doctors like released me, and I remember like my dad gave me a big hug, and then he cried, and he was like, Luis, I thought I was gonna lose you, like your sister. And then he was crying. That was like a really like emotional moment, and I was like, wow, because like I didn't even think that I was gonna die, you know. I didn't know all the possible scenarios that could have happened. And my dad told me, like, seeing this from a spiritual way, like from God's perspective, is like, yeah, we are gonna die, we don't know how, right? But I was like, that would be terrible to die like at 24 years old. And then he was like, yeah, your sister died at 9. And then they draw me here, they pray for me. That was like, now that I told you, like, I realized that I don't have like a lot of friends. People that I thought they were my friends, they are of course not, they are acquaintances. But now I can see like my family, I have a really good family. And I remember that my grandma told me, like, Luis, qué chingones papás tienes, ¿verdad? Like, how fucking great your parents are, right? And I was like, yeah, I can show you that text later, but that's how my grandma
Thanks,
told
Grandma.
me. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, actually, yeah, because like now I felt like God sent me like really good parents, because now, and I remember that I used to talk to a lot of people like, oh yeah, I don't have a really good relationship with my parents. And then when they told me their relationships, like their relationships are really bad. And I'm like, actually, we just have like discussions and that's it, you know. Like I have a really good relationship with my parents. Just like sometimes, oh yeah, I don't want to tell them like I did this or I traveled with these friends or that, you know, like small stuff. But now it's like my parents literally saved my life with all the stuff that they did when I needed it the most, you know.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That makes me think, hearing you say, isn't it interesting that at the time it was really difficult and you were in pain, but looking back on it, you're like, I was never in pain. I wonder if that's going to be a little bit like our experience of getting to heaven. That no matter how hard our life was here, how much suffering we experienced, that within the light and glory and healing of heaven, that it's not going to matter.
Yeah.
And so maybe that gives me a little more hope, but also perseverance to say, just keep going. It's going to be worth it.
Yeah, all right. I don't want to take more of your time because it's almost 4 o'clock. We're 4 minutes away. But the last question would be, what's your advice for men and women that are my age?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a humble question. I would say pay attention to your own fulfillment. Like, what brings you joy? What steals your joy? What brings you peace? And to, if you're willing, to kind of crack open the door and invite God in. God, if you exist, I give you permission to reveal yourself to me. That God, if you made me to be happy, show me the path. And then we can respond. Like, we don't have to make it up. He says, honor the Sabbath. So like stop by a church and go to mass or whatnot. And that I think if we ask him what he wants for us, that we have our own paths of what we think will make us happy, but he knows what will make us happy. He knows how we were made and has a plan for our fulfillment. Yeah, great answer. Well, Father Matt, thank you so much for being with me in Empower today. For those who are listening to the end of this episode, we really appreciate you. We send you a big hug. Please don't forget to share it in your Instagram stories. You can find me as @Luis Carlos Estrada 2. And Father Matt, it would be @Catholic Jax, right? Catholic Jax, yeah.
All right, so please don't forget to share it, and we hope like this project can keep growing. And yeah, thank you, Father.
God bless, Luis.
Really appreciate your
Take care.
time. See you all.